Let's solve questions 8 to 13 of IELTS Reading Academic Test 1 from Cambridge Book 18. Question numbers 1 to 7 have already been solved in another video. You'll find the link in the description of this video. The question type here is true, false, not given. The answers to this question type are in the same order as the information in the text. So the first thing that we do here is try to find out the tentative location of these answers in the passage. There is no obvious key information in these questions. That is, there are no capitalized words or numbers which can quickly tell us where the answers could be. What we do have is the word aeroponic in the 9th question. Having already done questions 1 to 7, what I know is that the word aeroponic is mentioned in the 2nd paragraph. It is again later mentioned in the 5th paragraph, which means this word cannot help me locate where the answers could be. Besides this, I see two words, electricity and beans. These are two words which may help me locate where the answers are. So first I'll scan the passage for these two words. The word electricity is mentioned in the 5th paragraph and beans are mentioned in the 6th paragraph. One thing that helped me locate these as I was scanning is that the answers to questions 1 to 7 were from paragraphs 1 to 4. So instinctively, I started scanning the passage after that, and I found these two words. Now that I have tentative location of these answers, I am expecting the answers of questions 8 to 13 from 5th and 6th paragraph. Let's read the 8th question. Urban farming can take place above or below ground. Let's start with the 5th paragraph. The parts of the paragraph that I'm focusing on are in bold on your screen. Urban farming is not a new phenomenon. Inner city agriculture is booming. Strawberries are being grown in containers. Mushrooms in underground car parks. So we are given two examples of things being grown using urban farming. One is strawberries, which are in containers, that is above ground. The other is mushrooms, which is underground, so that is below ground. These two examples tell us that urban farming can take place above or below ground. Therefore, the answer to the 8th question is true. The 9th question now. Some of the equipment used in aeroponic farming can be made by hand. This is where I'd found the answer to the 8th question. Aeroponic farming is mentioned in the next sentence and equipment is mentioned after that. Let's start reading. The equipment weighs little, can be installed on almost any flat surface, is cheap to buy, cheap to run, consuming tiny fraction of electricity. There is information about the weight of the equipment, the price of the equipment, that it is cheap. But there is no mention of whether any of this equipment can be made by hand. By hand means it can be made manually. The price of the equipment is mentioned, that it is cheap, and then it is mentioned that it is between 100 and 150 euros per square meter. However, nowhere is it clearly mentioned that it cannot be made by hand. So the answer is not given. We do not know whether any of this equipment can be made by hand or not. The 10th question. Urban farming relies more on electricity than some other types of farming. This is the sentence in the passage which mentions electricity. It is cheap to run too, consuming a tiny fraction of the electricity used by some techniques. Some techniques mentioned here are the other types of farming. A tiny fraction means a very small percentage. So the amount of electricity needed for urban farming is very less as compared to some other types of farming or other techniques. The answer is false. The confusing part here, however, is that there is no mention of urban farming in the sentence where we get the answer. Actually, urban farming is only mentioned at the beginning of this paragraph. However, the phrases urban farming and aeroponic farming are synonymous in this passage, and this it in this sentence refers to the equipment that is used for aeroponic farming or for urban farming. The 11th question now. Fruit and vegetables grown on an aeroponic urban farm are cheaper than traditionally grown organic produce. The words I keep in mind are cheaper, traditionally, and organic. The answer to the 10th question was at the end of the 5th paragraph. Let's start with the 6th paragraph now. Produce grown this way. So this way is aeroponic farming. It refers to the previous paragraph. So produce grown by aeroponic farming typically sells at prices that, while generally higher than those of classic intensive agriculture, are lower than soil-based organic growers. The word classic refers to traditional. What we get from here is that produce or fruits and vegetables which are grown by aeroponic method are more expensive than the produce grown by classic intensive agriculture, but they are lower than soil-based organic growers. So they are cheaper than the organic produce. The answer to the 11th question is true. This is a slightly confusing sentence because it mentions comparison of aeroponic produce with intensive agricultural produce and then organic produce. What can help us understand this is if we cross out this part of the sentence, which is between two commas, the sentence then becomes easier to understand. Produce grown this way typically sells at prices that are lower than soil-based organic growers. Another thing which could be confusing here is that the word cheap is mentioned twice at the end of the 5th paragraph. But there, the word cheap is first mentioned for prices of equipment, and then it is mentioned regarding the cost of running that equipment. It is a mention of the words produce, sales, and prices at the beginning of the 6th paragraph that tell us that the answer to the 11th question could be there. Moving on to the 12th question. Most produce can be grown on an aeroponic urban farm at any time of the year. This is where the answer to the 11th question is. Let's continue after this. I'm keeping in mind the phrase at any time of the year while scanning the passage. I'm looking for any mention of a month being mentioned or a season being mentioned. There are limits to what farmers can grow this way, of course, and much of the produce is suited to the summer month. Much of the produce refers to most produce. This way is again referring to the aeroponic farming or urban farming which is mentioned in the 5th paragraph. It is not mentioned again in the 6th paragraph, but this way which is mentioned here refers to aeroponic urban farming. So most of the produce can only be grown in summer months, which means it cannot be grown at any time of the year. The answer to the 12th question is false. The 13th question now. Beans take longer to grow on an urban farm than other vegetables. It means the amount of time that beans take is more. Let's read the sentence in the passage which mentions beans. And beans tend to take up a lot of space for not much return. What I understand from this sentence is that it takes a lot of space, it takes a lot of area to grow beans. For not much return means that not much money is earned when they are sold. There doesn't seem to be any mention of how long it takes to grow beans. The question mentions that they take longer to grow. It seems the answer is not given. However, to confirm, I'll read the sentence before this because the sentence before this mentions other vegetables like carrots and potatoes. There is no mention of how long these vegetables take to grow. It just mentions that most of them cannot be grown or they take too much space. The answer to the 13th question, therefore, is not given. What could be confusing here is that the word long is mentioned in the passage. It says the roots are simply too long. One, it is before the mention of beans in the passage. But more importantly, this long is referring to the length of the roots. In the question, the phrase take longer is referring to the amount of time. That's it for now. We are now done with solutions to all the questions of reading passage 1 of test 1 of IELTS Reading Academic, Cambridge Book 18. Hope these helped you. All the very best.